tucked amongst my raspberry canes and underneath the shade of an apple tree, here you will find this, my Blue Oyster box. This is made up of a bunch of old cedar fence panels that I turned into a box and some scrap wood, and with a bunch of half-inch holes drilled all throughout. And inside you will find it stacked with straw and wood chips and some old newspaper and cardboard, and layered in amongst a whole bunch of blue oyster mycelium. So think about one of those little tiny grow kits that you can get. You can supersize it in your own backyard. And it is late in the season, but I am getting a last of a little tiny flush. Come have a look. So you can see here, I've got a tiny little flush just starting. Some slightly bigger ones here and some tiny ones just bigger than a pin. And I think that you need to come back in a few days. Maybe we'll check back in about 3 or 4 days and see. We should have a big load of oyster mushrooms. And here we are after 5 days. And normally these would be a lot bigger, but it is cold, mid-November at the moment, so they seem to be going a little bit slower than usual, but there's still lots of room to grow, and we're going to get some amazing oyster mushrooms there. If you want to know how to build your own backyard blue oyster box, leave a comment down below, and maybe I'll do a video on it. Obviously, if you can get out in the woods and forage some fresh oyster mushrooms, there is nothing better than that. But a close second option is running out to your backyards and coming to have a look here. It's been about 10 days since we first checked on these oyster mushrooms, and after a good rain, they have boomed. Come have a look. All right, so they are big and beautiful and plump. You can see they're about the size of my hand here. There's all these little pins that have been pushing each other out of the way. I would probably pick them a little bit closer, but I was busy yesterday and they grow really quick once they start going. So just have a look at that. Now, I'm gonna get myself a little mushroom basket here and a big chef's knife, and I'm gonna put you down while we harvest these. Watch your fingers, but you just take that chef's knife and run it along there. Oh, wow. What a harvest of giant plump oyster mushrooms. They had a big rain yesterday, so we're gonna have to get them inside and sweat them down a little bit, but perfect for mushroom soup. So in the kitchen, we have got a good pound of oyster mushrooms from that flush, and that box has been going since the spring. It is now mid-November, and I've gotten pounds of it. So this is a great opportunity to make some cream of mushroom soup with our oyster mushrooms. And we've got everything we need right here. So I'll put the recipe down below, but we want to start off with about a pound of oyster mushrooms. I've got 1 large onion. I've got about 3 cloves of garlic, some cornstarch, or you can use flour if you like. We've got about a teaspoon of tarragon and about 2 teaspoons of fresh thyme, salt and pepper to your taste, and we've got a little bit of wine. I've got some red here. White wine works better, but I had a bottle of red open. And we're gonna need some stock. You can use for this either a vegetable stock, a mushroom stock, a beef stock if you want it really rich and dense, but I am going to be making a mushroom stock for this. Let's do that while we get some onions sweating down with about 4 tablespoons of butter in a medium pan. And just get those onions in there. While those onions are sweating away, let's turn our attention to the mushrooms and to my mushroom stock. For my mushroom stock, I'm going to cheat a little bit. This is a predominantly oyster mushroom, cream of mushroom soup, but you know what? I have some leftover dried chanterelles that I did last season. Well, they still smell fantastic. And I've got about a half a cup of dried chanterelles, and I'm just going to pour those into a bowl with 4 cups of water and just let those rehydrate. Set to those to the side for about 10 minutes while they rehydrate and kind of release some mushroom flavor. You're going to create yourself a nice mushroom stock. At this point, you could add a little bit of salt if you wanted there. If you have a big bounty of chanterelles and you dry a bunch of them, I prefer them frozen and in butter, but this is a great way for creating a quick broth or mushroom stock, and this is going to go wonderful with our cream of mushroom soup. All right, let's turn our attention to the star of the show, the oyster mushrooms. Got a nice big bunch here, and when you've harvested them off of a box, you want to make sure you cut the back off there. This is sometimes a little bit tougher where it connects to the mycelium. However, definitely don't throw that stuff away. This is great. Add it to the Ziploc bag in the freezer and make sure it's nice and clean, but store up a bunch and it makes a wonderful chicken stock or mushroom stock or veggie stock. Just add those frozen kind of tough bits there that aren't really great. They're full of flavor, but they are just a bit too hard as they've connected to the mycelium. Just make sure you don't have any dirt, any bugs or anything in there. That's going to go off into the freezer for later, and then I'm going to prepare up my oyster mushrooms here. Take the tops down, and we're just going to rough chop these. Nice and fine. Double check on the stems and the stalks there to see if they're getting a little tough or not. If they're a bit tough, throw them in with your stalk. If you're not weighing it, I'm looking at 3 cups of chopped oyster mushrooms there. Now, check on your onions. If they've started to sweat down nicely, now's the time to add some garlic. And let that garlic sweat down a little bit. After your garlic sweated down a bit, now's time to add some of your mushrooms. Now, it was a big rain last night, so these are pretty wet, so they're going to give up a lot of liquid. Stir those around a little bit. And while those are releasing some of their water and cooking down a little bit, now it's time to turn our attention back to our chanterelle stock. So get a slotted spoon or a colander, and we're just going to pull out those chanterelles. They will have given up some of their flavor and golden color to that stock, and it looks amazing. You don't have to get everyone out, but usually the chanterelles can get a little tough after they've been dehydrated and rehydrated. Try a little taste of that broth. Oh yeah, lovely. So it makes a great stock there, but you know what? Let's add the chanterelles to the mushroom soup. All right, chanterelles into the pot as well. All right, let's come over to the stove here, and the oyster mushrooms have sweated down nicely. The onions are nice and soft. We've got little bits of chanterelle, chopped chanterelle in there, and we've got rid of most of the water from the mushrooms. So I'm gonna add about a half a cup of red wine, or white wine, said even better. Don't worry about the color. You're gonna put a lot of other stuff in there, and this will still be a nice and white cream of mushroom soup. Let that red wine just reduce down and cook off a little bit before we stir in our 1 tablespoon or 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch. You can use some flour as well. You just need to cook it down a little bit. Get all of that in there. This is just going to help it thicken up nicely and give that nice, luxurious creaminess to our soup. After you've done that, you can add your mushroom stock or chicken stock or veggie stock, whatever you like. Stir that around and bring it up to a nice boil. After that comes to a boil, reduce it down to medium-low. Just to simmer here, and it's time to add a couple more ingredients. First of all, my secret ingredient, which is chanterelle powder. I've done this in a previous video. I will link to it up here, down there, down below somewhere. I just want a spoon of this chanterelle powder. It will just add that extra little umami boost already. This is a mushroom-packed soup, but that's just gonna help out a little bit more. We'll put in our 2 teaspoons of fresh thyme, our teaspoon of dried tarragon. If you don't have dried tarragon, you can just add another teaspoon of thyme there. About a teaspoon of salt or so, and some fresh pepper. And in goes our cream. I want about a cup to a cup and a half of cream. Kind of do it by eye there. That is just about a cup, maybe a splash more there, of cream. And that is already looking amazing. Now, just let that cook for about 15 minutes, 15-20 minutes on a simmer while all of those flavors come together. 20 minutes later and our mushroom soup is starting to thicken up just nicely. If you like yours stand-up spoon thick, you might want to add a second tablespoon of cornstarch or flour to a little bit, but this is how I like mine, a little bit nice and creamy, but a little bit on the thinner side. And I am actually going to also blend this a little bit just to emulsify some of the mushrooms and give it even a nicer texture for me. Now, you don't want to completely puree this, so if you have a blender, take out 1 or 2 cups of your soup and blend those up there, or I'm just going to hit it with a few pulses on the immersion blender here. That will let it thicken up a little bit too and spread some of those mushrooms around. I do want a bunch of the mushroom texture and some of those bigger ones in there, but this will just make that nice and luscious and creamy. Now, let that cook down for another 5 minutes or so and you will be ready to go. Soup has simmered for another 5 minutes and it is time to serve it up. Get yourself a nice ladle of that delicious soup. Oh, that looks incredible. Just bring that in there. A little extra salt for me. Some fresh ground pepper. Some extra thyme leaves just for presentation. And that is a delicious bowl of cream of mushroom soup. Oh yeah. Oh, the chunks of little chanterelles, big bits of oyster mushroom still. Oh, fantastic.